I now invite Dr. Varada Sambhus to present her paper on Vārkarī Sampradāya, Bhāgavat Dharma and Democratizing religious practices.
Namaste everyone. माझं नाव वरदा संभूस. सगळ्यांना आठवत असेल नागराजजींनी आपल्याला एक विनंती केली होती, तुमच्या मातृभाषेत तुमची ओळख द्या. तर मी मराठीमध्ये माझी ओळख देते आहे आणि सगळ्या आयोजकांचे मनापासून आभार. त्यांनी आम्हाला श्रीरंगम मध्ये यायची संधी दिली आणि इतक्या पुण्यस्थळी, इतक्या तीर्थस्थानी आम्हाला आमचे विचार मांडता येत आहेत. एवढ्या मोठ्या बुद्धिजीवी वर्गासमोर मला बोलता येतंय, याचा मला मनापासून आनंद आहे. सो आय बिगिन माय प्रेझेंटेशन विथ थँकिंग ऑल द ऑर्गनायझर्स and allowing us to present our thoughts and arpan our seva in this very sacred place of Srirangam. The title of my paper is Vārkarī Sampradāya, Bhāgavat Dharma and Democratizing Religious Practices. Before I really dive into the presentation and the arguments, I have certain anecdotes to explain. The term democracy in the title that you heard just now, I'm not using it in the sense of political processes. Though I myself am a student of political science, in this particular paper, the term democracy is used to indicate equal opportunity, equal access, and mainly equality among people. The question that I have been pondering upon for a quite while, because I have been working on Vārkarī Sampradāya and the Vari pilgrimage for last decade, and I recently got my PhD awarded for the very same subject. I have been thinking about the political aspects, the social aspects of bhakti, because generally what happens, bhakti is seen as a very private and dedication to God, which becomes very, very central to any bhakti tradition. But when we think of bhakti as public, what are the implications of it for our social, political, cultural life? That has been the quest I have been thinking about, pondering upon for a while. So as I said, democratization not of spirituality per se, but religion. Here spirituality is something which is absolutely concerned with personal being and individuals' ways of dedication to one's own Ishta Devata or whatever means one wants to adopt to achieve moksha or mukti. So I keep that domain separate because my belief, my conviction is spirituality in Hindu way of understanding has always been democratic. So there is no bar on attaining moksha to anybody. However, when it comes to religion, and religion here I refer to as upasana paddhati or ways of worship which are more ritualized. So as far as the ritualism of practices is concerned, there have been hierarchies. Those hierarchies have been based on caste or gender primarily, and there can be other considerations, marriage, age, etc. So as far as upasana paddhatis are concerned, this is a usual phenomena that Hinduism is criticized vehemently, particularly for caste, and with especially in the globalized world, the West academia, whenever they talk about religion in India, two important points are highlighted for bashing Hinduism, and that is caste and gender. So I want to see, because I have been working on Vārkarī Sampradāya, what is the take of the Vārkarī Sampradāya as far as caste and gender are concerned, and how does it connect to the social and religious democracy in India. As I mentioned, democracy not in the political sense, but more in terms of equality of access and opportunity. So having said all this, another important point, I am not explaining all the arguments that I have, but only the anecdotes. Whatever explanations and questions you might have, I'll be more than happy to answer them and take them in question and answer session with the permission of the chair. So Vārkarī Sampradāya is one of the most prominent Bhakti Sampradayas, mainly spread across the Marathi speaking region in Western India. The Vārkarī Sampradāya is essentially a Vaishnava Bhakti Sampradāya. The main deity of the Vārkarī Sampradāya is Vitthal or Panduranga, believed to be a child form of Krishna. Vārkarī Sampradāya is also known as the Bhāgavat Sampradāya and its philosophy as Bhāgavat Dharma. The Vārkarī Sampradāya is unequivocally associated with its annual pilgrimage to Pandharpur known as Vārī. Some of the prominent santas of Maharashtra like Jnaneshwar, Tukaram, Namdev, Eknath, Muktabai, Janabai, Soirabai, Kanupatra, Chokhamela, all these names we have generally heard of when we think of Indian Sant tradition. They are believed to belong to Vārkarī Sampradāya. Though the origins of Vārkarī tradition are not accurately traceable to a single source, it can be said that it had strong roots among ordinary people in the 13th century Marathi speaking region. So what is Bhāgavat Dharma? I just mentioned that the philosophy of Vārkarī Sampradāya is known as Bhāgavat Dharma. Vārkarī Sampradāya focuses on the bhakti way or marga of moksha or liberation. Though bhakti assumes duality of devotee and deity, in many Bhāgavat Sampradayas, the defining philosophy of Vārkarī Sampradāya is of Advaita. So this is very important point. The moment we think of bhakti, we think of duality of bhakta and the devata or God. Whereas in Vārkarī tradition, though bhakti, it is a bhakti sampradaya, it is not assumed on duality but Advaitism, and which is the tradition of Advaitism goes back to Adi Shankaracharya. The highly heralded scripture, which can be said to be the cornerstone of the Vārkarī canon, Jnaneshwari, preaches the Advaita philosophy. Even though Vārkarī Sampradāya is founded on the sophisticated philosophy of Advaita, the practices that Sampradāya preaches are easy. Bhāgavat Dharma, as propounded by Vārkarī Sampradāya, does not advocate rigid ways but teaches simple bhakti which can be accessed and practiced by all, including women, Shudras and the poor. Adoption of bhakti and its practices primarily as a primary means of moksha, the child form of Krishna as the deity, the Vārkarī Sampradāya is known as the Bhāgavata Sampradāya and Vārkarī philosophy is known as Bhāgavat Dharma. So I am skipping the other parts of the paper. I'll just come to main crux that I want to focus on. Bhagavatas are those who worship Vasudev, Krishna or Vishnu. Bhagavat Dharma promotes simple methods of God worship. The Bhagavatas do not require Sanskrit text, and this is very important. Bhagavatas do not require Sanskrit text, but they are not necessarily against it, because that's another important debate that has been imposed upon us, that Prakrit versus Sanskrit and Sanskrit as Brahminical. So this is very important that Bhagavatas and particularly Vārkarī Sampradāya, though all the compositions of the Vārkarī Santas are in Prakrit or in Marathi, they are not anti-Sanskrit. So that needs to be highlighted here. The rigorous rituals or heretic activities are not promoted in the Vārkarī Sampradāya, but simple methods, and these methods of bhakti are both private and public. In public means of bhakti like Kirtan, like the Vāri pilgrimage, like Bhajan, Nam Ghosh, all these are public dimensions of bhakti which are propagated by the Vārkarī Sampradāya. One need not become a sannyasi or one need not abandon the worldly life, but even within the day-to-day life, even being a householder, one can attain moksha with bhakti. That's the primary teaching of the Vārkarī Sampradāya. And apart from other things, Vārkarī Sampradāya is also known as the householder Sampradāya. So there are two extreme opinions about the teachings and the works of the Vārkarī Sampradāya and the Santas of the Vārkarī Sampradāya. One school of thought regards the works and the message of the Vārkarī Santas as Vidrohi or revolutionary, pioneering radical social change against Vedic Dharma and denouncing Vedas. So this is one opinion, one school of thought. The other school, it regards Vārkarī Sampradāya and the Santas of the Vārkarī Sampradāya as otherworldly, who had no concern for social and political happenings around them. So these two extreme opinions, one, Vārkarī Sampradāya as status quoist, no concern for social and political affairs, but merely interested in otherworldly bhakti. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought argues that Vārkarī Sampradāya is Vidrohi, revolutionary, and it wanted to question all the values which were propagated by the Vedic Dharma. However, in my understanding, and many other scholars, including Iravati Karve, Sonopant Dandekar, Shankar Abhyankar, G.A. Delhari, all this, and recently Christian Nowitzki, all these scholars, they have argued that Vārkarī Sampradāya has more of a reconciliatory approach. So it has its deity as Panduranga, but it will not abandon or it will not demonize other kind of deities. So that's what we started saying in the very inauguratory session of this particular conference, that even though some people will be considered as Vaishnavas, or here in this case as worshippers of Vitthala, it need not mean that there is abandoning of other forms of worship. The very simple example during the Wari pilgrimage is when the Palakis arrive at Jezuri, which is a primarily Shaivite place of Khandoba, which is considered as form of Shiva. So the celebration at Jezuri and primarily this pilgrimage being the Vaishnava pilgrimage, there is the culmination. It does not practice, particularly when it comes to the public celebration or public festivities of bhakti, public practices of bhakti like Kirtan or Vārkarī, it does not practice caste, but at the same time it is not vehement opposition to Varnashrama Dharma. So there is the middle path which the Vārkarī Santas propagated, and having the experience of Jainism, Buddhism, which were already present in the scenario, as well as something called Mahanubhav Sampradāya, which was established by Chakradhar, who adopted radical means of equality. No taboo of whatsoever, but over the years, these Sampradayas declined. They could not sustain with the pressure of social rituals, with the pressure of social norms. However, because the Vārkarī Sampradāya adopted this reconciliatory approach, it keeps thriving till date. So as far as the question of political consciousness is concerned, because all this equality, whether it is in terms of caste or gender, it is very much present in religious domain in the Vārkarī tradition. The question is whether it translated into political understanding or political consciousness. I don't have really worked extensively on this linkage, but one thing is very clear, that the Swaraj which was established under Shivaji Maharaj in the 17th century, and which had the sense of sovereignty, which had the sense of nationhood, the sense of common identity among people, it was not possible without the contribution of the Bhāgavat Dharma and without the contribution of the Santas of the Vārkarī tradition. And this is not me for the first time who is arguing this. Some scholars like Mahadev Govind Ranade, Justice Ranade, has made this argument in Rise of the Maratha Power. So concluding, I will simply conclude this presentation. The primary message and the domain of the work of the Vārkarī Santas and the Vārkarī Sampradāya have been spiritual religious domain. The quest for equality among all human beings has resulted from their spiritual philosophy. The direct implication of their teaching in political domain is far less clear. The primary objective has been to encourage individuals to lead moral and committed lives and channel their energies to achieve their spiritual goals. They made bhakti the basis of their teachings and advocated simple means which were both personal and public. The adoption of non-ritualistic means which all could practice, non-discrimination based on caste, class and gender in the spiritual and religious domain, and preference to the majority sections of society, namely Stri Shudradi, were conscious choices on the part of Vārkarī Santas. The differences of opinion regarding the extent to which these deliberate choices resulted in substantial social and political change to establish an egalitarian society. However, there is no doubt that they opened up religious and spiritual spaces previously closed to the majority sections of society. The works of the Vārkarī Santas and Vārkarī Sampradāya can be credited with igniting confidence among masses that they can attain highest spiritual goal irrespective of dogma of caste and gender. It would not be an exaggeration to argue that Vārkarī Santas and Vārkarī Sampradāya were instrumental in igniting pride in one's own desh and bhasha, that is, in one's own country and language, and thereby shaped the psyche of Marathi people and democratized religious aspects of people's daily lives. Thank you.
So how far is that true? I thought it is like the grown-up form of Krishna with his consent.
Please come here.
So when we see the entire iconography, there is nothing that can be really thought of in terms of an adult form. Probably also because of the nature and the iconography, it's understood it's a child form, because it's even the term Pandurang. So it's seen, Vitthal or Panduranga is seen as a shepherd who has gone to graze cattle. So with this understanding, but as far as folk tales are concerned, Rukmini got angry with Krishna, and then Krishna came to meet Pundalik to give him darshan, and then adopted because Pundalika threw a brick for Krishna to stand on. This story also goes. So if we go according to this folk tale, obviously it is not a child form. But as far as the iconography of the Murti is concerned, it can be said that it is and primarily because I am not a historian per se or an archaeologist, what I go with is the Vārkarī belief. What matters to me are people's faith, people's belief systems, what people aspired for. All that matters to me. And as far as Vārkarī belief is concerned, Vithala is a child form of Krishna.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So my question is primarily, vis-a-vis your conceptualization, rather your reference to the two schools that you mentioned, right? And maybe I was just trying to connect that two, and I was basically see if we can look at it to the idea of space. Because even Novetske in his book, The Quotidian Revolution, he talks about that quotidian space where the elite and the non-elite meet. I'm quoting from him. Yes. So basically, if we can try to see this as a part of a continuum rather than seeing them as being opposites, and possibly there could be some point of convergence. There's just a possibility of looking, yes. Because since you are looking at democratic values, see, we need a space to negotiate those ideas. So possibly we can think on those terms.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you. Primarily, I work on the notion of bhakti and bhakti public, and yes. I use Novetske's work.
He has an essay on that, on the bhakti public sphere. Right.
So there is another essay by Novetske which is called Brahmin Double, and wherein he talks about the caste angle and how Brahmins themselves were instrumental in uplifting the untouchables and the Shudras. Right. So that is another good read. But I'm not referring to these two schools primarily as the space between space for negotiation. Right. The space for negotiation is available definitely, without a doubt, at all Vārkarī Bhakti practices. Right. And that is what my entire thesis on Vari talks about, how it is a space for reconciliation and negotiation. Whether it's Shaiva Vaishnava, whether it's Saguna Nirguna, right. Whether it's Dvaita Advaita, all these forms, whether it's Prakrit Sanskrit. So all these debates. But as far as the writings on the Vārkarī Sampradāya is concerned, how do we understand what people are saying about the contribution of the Vārkarī Sampradāya?
Absolutely.
So in that sense, I divide these opinions into two. One saying, okay, this is revolutionary and nothing to do with Vedic Dharma, or in fact criticism. On the other hand, there is glorification, saying that okay, Vārkarī Sampradāya is all for change, and it established so many radical forms. So what I'm doing primarily is to think analytically, and obviously as researchers we need to use categories. Right. Without categories we can't
and
work.
Question them as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Madam, I have a question. In the first part of the paper, you said that the Sampradāya, Vārkarī Sampradāya, has Advaita influence. Of course, your quotation on Jnaneshwari was very relevant. But my question is does that presence of Jnaneshwari, or does that philosophy of Advaita reflect in the practice of the sect? Because, for example, in Saiva, we have some concepts like Sivohama, something like that. Do they have any such essential thing? Or is it that one among the cardinal proponents was attached to Advaita, and that is why we are classifying. So that doxographical aspect, I just wanted to clarify it.
Thank you for this question. I'll give you just two instances of the Vārkarīs. One, when you go to any public site of bhakti of the Vārkarīs, what you will say, there is a system of mutual namaskara. So if I bow down to you, you will in turn bow down to me, irrespective of gender, caste, age, anything else, rich, poor, social status, etc. So there is reciprocal namaskara, and that is inevitable in Vārkarī Sampradāya. So even usually when somebody comes to our place, and if I go down to them, they will do return namaskar to me. And I was, in fact, the very interest that I got into this, once I went for Vari, like only for a short duration, and when I returned home, my father touched my feet. And that was so surprising, because fathers otherwise would not touch feet of their children, and particularly daughters probably. And I was so surprised, and then he said, because you have been to Vari, now you have become Mauli, or a personification of Gyaneshwar or Panduranga. And this is the second point. Everybody in the Vārkarī Sampradāya will be referred to as Mauli. Mauli is a feminine pronoun for mother. And so the Santas of the Vārkarī tradition are Mauli. The deity Vitthal is Vithova Mauli. The Vārkarīs themselves are Mauli. The horses which run in the Ringan, so there is this particular form, they are also Mauli. And any police person, any stall vendor, they all become Mauli when we are at the site. So I think these two instances are good enough to say whether it is a practice of Advaita in day-to-day lives.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, madam. So my question was, usually along with Krishna or Vithala, there's usually Radha is there. So in this case, it's a Swakiya relationship with Rukmani. Is it due to the fact that Rukmani was a princess of Vidarbha in the Mahabharata? And second thing, Samarth Ramdas, apparently the guru of Shivaji Maharaj, largely spoke about Rama and Hanuman. So was he associated with the Vārkarīs? And what happened to their influence in, say, British times after they defeated the Maratha Empire? So,
I didn't get the last bit of the question. Maratha. Okay. So there, I think what I could understand, there are three questions. First, about Rukmini. So there are multiple folk tales about Rukmini, and as I mentioned just now, one about Rukmini being angry with Krishna, and Krishna having come to give darshan to Pundalik, and Rukmini following, because Krishna did not return for years together. So finally she is out of her home looking for her husband. Where has he gone? And then she is angry with him. Why did you not return home? And then she has a different temple in the Pandharpur Kshetra. So that's the only place probably where Rukmini and Krishna or Radha and Krishna are not together per se. That's one. Second question about Ramdas Swami. So Ramdasa, there are historical evidences which say that Ramdas went to Pandharpur and he said, "Hey, Srirama ka tu asa ubhai the." So basically asking that there is so much of Mughal invasion and there is so much of brutality, and why are you standing akimbo, keeping your hands on your hips and doing no action? Because if we look at closely, the adoption of Rama by Ramdasi Sampradāya or Samarth Sampradāya is that of Kodandadhari Ram, with bow and arrow, Ram with bow and arrow. So he adopted the symbol and the deity which was necessary for the times. He really wanted to propagate action. Vis-a-vis the iconography of Panduranga is that of more of a passivity. So that was a clear, and then again there are historical evidences that Ramdas himself used to go to Pandharpur Vari every year. Today, at least since 1960s onwards, the Palki of Samartha Ramdas joins the Vari procession every year from Sajjangarh, the Samadhi place of Ramdas. As far as the traditions fade after the British arrival, the tradition continues. In fact, from the times of arrival of British, probably I can make that connection, the Fadas. So that Sant per se, the tradition of Santas, is almost to a standstill after 17th century, after Sant Bahinabai, who was disciple of Tukaram. However, the tradition continues through the system of Fadas. So if at all we want to see where is Vārkarī Sampradāya located, it is in the Fadas. These are like mathas run by the great practitioners of the tradition, those who have the adhikar to give tulsi mala and get people initiated in the Sampradāya. So initiation is not a right word, but because of lack of any other word I am using it. Thank you.